Hey guys, welcome to Rebuilding the Beast. I'm your host, Bessa Zazili, NBA player turned podcast host. And on this show, I'm going to have a lot of my inspiring friends come on to share with you their rebuilding journeys. I hope you can take the tips from their lives and apply it to your life as well. Oh, and don't forget to hit subscribe, like, comment, share with a friend. All the things. All right, I'll see you guys soon. Lana Shay, welcome to the Rebuilding Beast podcast. Okay, I'm going to break it down now. So all the things. Co-founder of Psychedelic Times, author of the book Let me start over.
No, it's good. That was so.
All right, so Lana Shay, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the Rebuilding Beast podcast. You're the co-founder of Psychedelic Times, author of the book, which I love so far. I'm a quarter way through it. Erotic Hustle, Redefining Sin Through Sacred Sexuality. You talk about your work in the sex industry as an exotic dancer, webcam model, discuss your journey into your field as a young woman, the visions that you had and that you received through plant medicine, and how to bring sacredness and positivity back into this highly stigmatized realm.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of taboo subjects in this book.
All of them.
And I love it because that's kind of what this whole thing is about. You say redefining sin. That's very much along the lines of Rebuilding the Beast. But how you doing today? Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here and I feel great. Yeah, I'm doing great.
Good. So now we're going to talk about, like I said, taboo topics that people are scared to talk about. When you wrote this book, who are you hoping would read it?
I'm going to go 2 steps back before I answer your question and add on. So I changed the book title a little bit right before I put it out, and I added "and psychedelics" to the very end of it. So redefining sin through sacred sexuality and psychedelics, because it was a big piece of the catalyst. And also psychedelictimes.com. I was the co-founder, no longer involved, and Theo Ventures is my primary focus right now. So that being said, and back to your question, that's a big one to answer. I wonder if
you actually might. I think you might need to bring it closer.
Yeah,
so.
Do I?
Just pull it closer. You
that and take this off because now we have the AC off. And I'm hot. Perfect. We're talking about stripping, and I'm already taking my clothes off.
Actually, I want to start. Let's start here. So, conscious sex worker, right? So we're talking about sex. We're talking about psychedelics. These are, like I said, taboo subjects, right? So, the book is called Erotic Hustle. Erotic Hustle or Hustler?
Erotic Hustle. You got it.
Okay. Before we go into the practice right now, explain how you first got into the world of sex work. Like, was it through exotic dancing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'd love to have a more profound answer, but it was very simply, that I wanted money fast. I had just come back from traveling the world. I had come back from France and I really left my heart there. I came back home and I said, I don't want to live in this country anymore. I don't align with the values of this country. I feel at home in France and I need to go back ASAP. I told a girlfriend that, and she was a stripper, and she said, okay, just come dance. You'll make money really fast. And I said, okay, I got to get out of this country. I'm going to go dance. And that was
There's no hesitation at this point. Was there anything in your mind? What did you think about the industry before you got there? And then what was it like when you did?
Oh, there was always so much allure. And I don't know exactly where it was from. Maybe from potentially my family, and especially my mother, my cousins being really obsessed with Madonna. And I remember popping in a videotape, like in the VCR when I was very young, and it was Madonna live, and she was so erotic and sensual and sexual. She was like humping a bed like on stage, and I was just like, what is this, really liberated sexual energy? Like, where does that come from? And it felt so good to me to watch that, and there was no shame or inhibition. And I think maybe there was a spark there, and sexuality and sex work, anything in that realm has always felt pretty comfortable for me. But that was one moment I remember really young. And then I remember creating a strip club in my bedroom with a couple of my girlfriends in like 5th grade, maybe 4th grade.
I read that part.
I was really young, and we're like, okay, what are we going to do today? Let's create a strip club. And we like turn all the lights off and get like a flashlight and pretend it's a strobe light. And just, we were silly about it. It wasn't like, there was no shame. It was like erotic innocence.
Use the word like shame a couple times now, right? When you talk about this stuff. When I was reading this book and I was wondering to myself, I said, is this book meant to, so we're trying to take the stigma away. So is this book meant to educate the people that don't know anything about it? Or is it meant to empower the people who are working in the industry? What were you trying to accomplish with this book?
That's such a good question. Both. Both. I believe that there are so many women entering the industry in the beginning or in it now that feel bad about what they're doing, and they feel shameful. And then they have, there's a story in the book at some point, one of my girlfriends, her father found out and totally disowned her and just like tore her apart. And she was just so sweet and innocent and just like angelic. She was not doing anything wrong. I don't believe any of us are. And then there's the people who look at this industry and they have all their preconceived notions, but they just know nothing about it. So it's for both.
Tantrika. That's a word that I did not know until I read this book. Can you explain Tantra and what the practice is?
That's a huge can of worms to open. Really? We can do a whole 5 podcasts about that one.
Really?
But Tantra, I believe, it's a way of life and really old practice. I'm really connected to and aligned with ancient Indian practices like Ayurveda, and I was a trained yoga instructor. I'm not a huge practitioner anymore, but and Tantra goes hand in hand with all of that. It's just an exchange of conscious energy, and in terms of sexuality, conscious sexual energy. So you're not just like, I like to give the contrast of, really typical porn and people just sport fucking. Like there's no soul in it. They're not connected. It's just like this raw, fleshy, primal, and there's nothing wrong with that. That aspect of it. There are other things that I could say something about that feel like there's something wrong, but it's the opposite, Tantra. You can look at it that way. I feel like it's really easy to digest if I put it that way. It's where you're deeply connecting with someone on a soul level, not just sexually, but in life in general. Like you're consciously exchanging your energy with people, and you're very intentional as you walk through the world. And you know that what you're doing is affecting everything else, every decision you make, every step you take.
Which is a very interesting topic, because people have always thought about strip clubs, for example. They've always thought about that environment as not very conscious, but you're trying to bring consciousness to it. And part of the way you were able to get to that point is through psychedelics.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell me about the first time you were introduced to psychedelics?
Oh, goodness. I feel so grateful and blessed that my grandfather, before I was born, was the president of the American Cannabis Society, right, in little old Madison, Wisconsin, and was a freedom fighter and an activist and trying to legalize the herb, and talked about it as medicine. He used the word medicine with marijuana, cannabis. So I was brought into the world with that understanding almost, like.
Was he a hero though? As you saw him doing that work, was he viewed as a hero in the society?
Well, yeah, by all the people around him, for sure. And I didn't really understand it or pay any attention to it, to be honest with you, until I was older. He passed when I was young. And I started understanding it as I grew and felt power there. I felt like very connected to that. Someone who was really, he devoted his life to that cause. Like he wanted everyone to have access and not be worried to have that right of cognitive liberty. Like I get to do whatever I want with my mind and my body with whatever plants I choose. I'm not an advocate for pharmaceuticals or anything that is destructive to the body, but things that come from the earth, psychedelics, plant medicines. Yeah.
When did your psychedelic use morph from what a lot of people use it for, which is the play part of it, party, into a spiritual experience?
Yeah, I love that question. And I'll just be really vulnerable and unfiltered.
That's what we're here for. Please be vulnerable.
I just a few days ago, literally 2 days ago. So I feel like this is a really auspicious time to be recording a podcast, because only 2 days ago I had a very intentional therapeutic ceremony with my partner using MDMA. And it just puts you in this really raw, open-hearted, unfiltered place. And capturing that, I just love for everyone, not just myself. So I appreciate being able to speak on this. And I think it was very early on that psychedelics morphed from, okay, I'm just getting high and I'm watching the walls drip and flowers grow out of like shadows and it's beautiful. It was always pretty spiritual for me, actually. Why? Because I have a lot of trauma. And I feel that as soon as psychedelics come in and open you up, you have to start feeling that and looking at it. And that is a deep, profound, intense process. So not like the first time I took a psychedelic or got high, I was like, oh God, it wasn't like spiritual right away. It was definitely a little bit of exploration in the beginning. But I do think I was young. I was maybe 15 when I first ate a mass amount of mushrooms. Like it had to have been way over 5 grams. Actually, it was just a dose that I shouldn't have ingested, to be honest. But my friend was like, oh, just eat the whole bag. I'm like, okay. And then the car we were in started on fire while we were driving.
Oh, wow.
And it was just...
It caught on fire?
It literally caught on fire. Something like he didn't screw one of the caps on or something. It was an older, like, shitty car. And it was literally in flames, like the hood of the car in flames while we were in it. And things started opening up at that moment. The fear came up, and because I had mushrooms in my system, I was able to look at that fear and dance with it in a different way. Normally I would just go into full fight or flight, like I'm going to die, I'm in a burning car. But yeah, I think it was from that point on that everything had a different meaning when I took psychedelics.
When I talk to people who use psychedelics as a way to heal, they talk about the ability, like it almost helps you get this distance from your emotions, right? You're able to almost look at yourself reacting to a situation and ask the question, which we usually don't have the liberty to ask. It's just, is this me reacting to this, or is this a previous trauma responding to this? It also sounds like it's an ongoing process because, like you said, you just had a journey a couple of days ago. What has that been like for you? Is that something that as soon as you decided I was going to use this for spiritual purposes, that you just unlocked everything and he's like, all right, so now I know I got to fix this. I got to fix this thing over here. And how's that journey been with psychedelics? Maybe for the people that don't understand anything about it.
Yeah. Great question. MDMA is a big one for me, and I know it's not completely in the psychedelic category, but it is in the medicinal category for me.
So people know, what is MDMA?
MDMA it's the love drug. It's ecstasy. It's something that was created, actually a compound that was created for marriage counseling in the beginning. And
that's what it was made for?
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the first couple that used it said something like, oh, this feels like it's been 10 years of therapy in one session. And it really, really is. I was with my ex-husband for 11 years, and it was our medicine. It's where we came together to work through everything.
Wow.
And it works. So I think when I was younger, when I was experiencing all this trauma and just living in that trauma and acting from that place, I was 14 or 15 when I started taking a lot of MDMA, maybe every weekend for almost a year. Which is like ridiculous. It's a copious amount nobody should actually be taking it that much. It's not neurotoxic. That's what's been found through all of the clinical trials, but it will deplete you. So I can say that this is a safe substance because I've taken that much and I'm still fully functional, and all the myths, I don't have holes in my brain. Like, I'm doing great, I feel. But yeah, I was taking a lot of that. And at that time, I was really able to feel my pain. And that's where an opening happened there. And it's not until I was in my mid-20s that I actually got to the point where I was hearing MDMA for PTSD and psychedelic psychotherapy. But now, fortunately, we're at that point.
I want to talk about, and please excuse my ignorance, and maybe I'll ask the question the way that I just know how to ask it, right?
Yeah.
We've talked about trauma a couple of times too, PTSD, and a thing that a lot of people are dealing with. A lot of people who have been on this podcast and highly achieved people, they're still talking about the traumas that they're working through, and that's part of rebuilding the beast. So if you don't mind sharing what kind of traumas that you've been dealing with and how this whole process has been in terms of using psychedelics and healing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know that's probably,
Yeah, that was the starting point. We already went in. When I started taking a lot of MDMA when I was younger, that was my healing process. There was definitely a long period in my teenage years where I was suicidal, and I was finding any way I could to escape from my reality because it was too painful. I couldn't live in it. So I just kept ingesting substances and having new experiences. And the MDMA, I think, saved my life, truly, because I was able, honestly, let's move forward a little bit. It was definitely the LSD, because that's when I had taken all the MDMA and then I started experiencing LSD. And that's when I think it was a week after I took LSD, went in my bedroom, I opened my closet, and I remember yelling to my dad in the room right next door, all of my clothes are black. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And what is wrong with me? And he said, oh, you just noticed that? Like, I was wondering too, like, fucking lighten up. What is your problem? I'm like, oh man, I need to bring some color back into my life.
checking to see how much color you brought into it.
I'm wearing all black, but there's gold. So there's the lining, the gold lining.
The gold lining.
That was good.
I'm taking that one. I'm still in that one. But before you even get to that point of even healing, I want to talk about the traumas.
Yeah.
And the things that you were going through. How did you get to a point of suicidal ideation or just having suicidal thoughts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks for looping it back. It's easy to walk away from that one. I grew up with both of my parents have mental illness, pretty severe mental illness. My father was beaten and abused at a level that I can't actually fathom. His parents were alcoholics, and he'd get beaten for trying to take a glass of milk out of the fridge because he was starving and not fed for days. They would forget to feed him, and then they'd lock him in his room, and he'd urinate on himself, and they'd send him to school like that with like marks all over him, dirty clothes, and that was his entire childhood. So from a really early age, I heard about that, and even though I wasn't experiencing it myself, it was painful, extremely painful to know that my father went through that. And then I know now that I am very empathic, and to just witness that and witness him, he lives in that place. He's never healed his trauma. He just, he lives in mental illness. And he was very harsh with me, and just little things. I remember him saying, looking at my report card, like, oh, you have all these B pluses. Why couldn't you just make it an A? Like, get your shit together. Like, it was never good enough. I was never good enough. And he hated my mother. So there was a piece of me that he'd look at and always hate. So I could feel, he'd say he loved me, but he also hated me and like was disgusted by me. And then he got abusive at some point. He was upset about something and picked me up by my neck and threw me in my closet and then shut the door and moved my bunk bed against the closet so I couldn't get out. It was really heavy. It was like a metal bunk bed. So I had to just keep pushing it, inching, until I could get out the door and leave the house, out the window, escape, It wasn't always like this, but there were quite a few circumstances. He was scary. He was violent and didn't see him for most of my childhood. He was a 4-time convicted felon and he was in prison most of my life. So I didn't really have a dad, I felt, until later. And then when I did, he was just this scary person. Our relationship has shifted since then, but my mother was extremely abusive. She'd go on these tangents and just say all of these very abusive things. And it was mostly emotional abuse, less physical. And then my father's mother, the one that was an alcoholic, she didn't treat me the same way that she did him, but she was still very cold toward me. She said something to me that has always stuck. I don't even know what we were talking about, but she looked at me and she said, "You're so cute." I was like, "Okay, great, thanks." And then she said, "I just want you to know you'll always be so cute, but you'll never be beautiful." I was just like, what kind of fucked up thing is that? Who says that to a child, Like what kind of delusional, but now I know her brain was like saturated in alcohol. God knows if it was even functioning. But yeah, stuff like that was said a lot.
It was very interesting to read, even after the situation with your dad throwing you in the closet, that you guys didn't speak after that or something along those lines, or you didn't speak for a long time, but he would still leave money for you on the counter. Right? You're like, well, it's still his way of saying, I love you, but I don't really know how to love you, maybe. Mm-hmm. Whose dad was it that was fighting the fight for cannabis? Is that your mom or your dad?
That was my mom's dad.
Okay.
Such a different family dynamic.
Okay. So now I then have this thought in my head because when you talk about people who are dancers, actually, I need to move this key from the table. This is not how the podcast. So when you talk about people who work in the exotic dancing industry, people who are strippers, people who are sex workers, there is a stereotype that there is some background trauma that they're working through to even be comfortable enough to work in this industry. Have you found from interacting with people, what have you found from talking to these women or to the men who are working in these industries?
I have found, there's this stereotype of dancers, and I'm sure you've heard this, that they have daddy issues, right? Like strippers have daddy issues.
Is that true?
It's true. And I'm apologizing right now to all of my dancer friends who don't have daddy issues, but to be honest, a lot of them have gone through a lot of hurt and pain and trauma, struggle. And just like we all have at, different levels, degrees. And of course, there are a lot of dancers who have come from, beautiful homes, beautiful families that are not broken. And they're just like, okay, this is a great option for me at this moment.
I asked this question for two reasons. One of them is, yes, I want to know, is that true that women who are strippers have daddy issues? But at the same time, I am a man, right? And my job in having this conversation is, what can we do better as men, as fathers? How can we act? What have you found in their relationship with their dads that they felt like they were lacking? That's more of my question.
Because I have had an opportunity to parent with my ex-husband. He had a son when we met, and he was 6 and now he's 20. He's all grown up in some ways. I was able to watch my ex-husband be a father, and I I got to see all the things he did wrong and all the things he did right. And the only thing I can say is that before you have children, as a man or a woman, you need to take care of your shit. You need to heal your trauma, and you need to really take a good look at what you experienced as a child and make sure you are not repeating that pattern with your children. Maybe take some psychedelics.
Okay. Now
it's a big.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Let's also talk about the men who visit the strip clubs.
Yeah.
Because there's a stereotype of men objectifying women. It's not really a very conscious place. So we keep talking about conscious sex and the sanctity of sex.
Mm-hmm.
But like, you know, you go into this atmosphere that's really seedy. It's like, I really want to hear what it's like to be in a strip club. What kind of men do you think and do you find walk into these strip clubs? Are they also the ones that need the healing as well?
Oh yeah, you just hit the nail on the head right there. I find that a lot of the men that I've sat down with or I attract, which it's interesting because you're hearing my perspective right now. I'm speaking on this, and I am going to, and I strongly believe this, I'm going to attract certain people. I'm going to end up with certain people. Not every single person is going to end up interfacing with me in a strip club or anywhere for that matter. So this is just my perspective. And I found that these men are empty. They're feeling empty inside and they don't know why. And what they really, really crave, what they're lacking is presence. And that's most of the people on the planet. There is really a lack of true presence. It's so rare to sit down with someone and have them feel like they're really present with you and they're really with you in that moment and paying attention to you and want to connect with you. We're all, especially in like this Western society, we're just like, we're doing our own thing. It's an individualistic society. We're here for ourselves. We're trying to get ahead and no one else matters. And so many people get stepped on in the process. And these men walk in just feeling empty, like their partners, their wives aren't present with them, and they're not present with themselves.
Have you ever felt unsafe in an environment with a client? And then what did you do if you did?
Grab a bouncer. I'm pretty good. At some point, I think I needed to learn how to get to that place where I felt safe, how to get myself there. And that was also me healing from being a child and not feeling safe and going, oh, it's okay. I never feel safe anyway. So why should I try to get myself in a place where I do? This is normal. But I've had to learn, and that's been a healing process. Oh, I don't feel safe with this man. What do I do? Okay, I need to get up right now, walk away and grab somebody to remove him. And that has happened a few times. Or I figure it out on my own. Like I've had to grab guys' hands and pin them up against a booth or chair or whatever and say, I don't like what you're doing and you have to stop. Took a long time to get there.
Because I even read parts in the book where you're like, you would move people's hands, they put it back. You move their hands, they put it back. And after a while, you're like, all right, whatever. Mm-hmm. And you would go along with it. Even reading stories on Instagram and seeing DMs that women have to deal with, I can't imagine what kind of requests you've gotten at a strip club, because people are doing this in people's DMs where they're far away from each other. When you're in an environment that is a strip club, I wonder what is the kinkiest thing you've heard a guy say? What is the craziest request? By the way, this question was written by a woman.
I love this question because I feel like such an innocent stripper. You'll find somewhere in the book, so spoiler alert, I never got to the point in a strip club where I was intimate with somebody. I like never did anything sexual, like maybe a kiss or something, but I never touched anybody's genitals. Actually, women. Okay, I'm lying, but not men.
Whoa. Wait, hold up. You just can't jump forward. Wait. Why do women get preferential treatment at the strip club? That's what I want to know.
I've always felt safer with them.
Okay.
Yeah. And I also just like that energy. like in the club with a woman. You know, I'm so used to it with men. So it's so thrilling to have that dynamic with women there. It's so different. It just feels safe, you know, and not every woman that I've been like in a VIP room with has been like intimate or like sexual, but a couple I'm like, I actually am attracted to this woman, or like I'm enjoying this and she wants this, I want this, it's mutual. Yeah, we can like go a little bit further, and very rare, but it's happened.
There was a part of the book when you talked about your attraction to another girl. And what was that whole experience like in trying to figure out your sexuality? Like, was it a scary experience? Was it exciting to know that you know what your sexuality is, or you're discovering just new things about yourself?
Yeah. When I was younger, I was scared. I remember having experiences with my girlfriend, like my best friend. We were just being, you know, playful and intimate with each other. And walking away from that, I felt like ashamed, kind of dirty. I wasn't supposed to tell anyone. I knew that we had to keep it a secret, or at least I thought we had to keep it a secret. But I also, my family is very sexual and openly sexual. Like I remember even my cousins being like flirty with each other, which now in a lot of ways that sounds like wrong. Okay, your family, you shouldn't be that way, but they just like, you know, kiss each other, they'd just be flirty, and it always seemed okay in that way. I think it wasn't until high school when I started to go, okay, like some of my friends openly say that they're gay or lesbian or whatever, and like that's what I am, or I'm like, I like women, so I'm not going to keep pretending, and there's nothing wrong with it. You know, it took a long time, and I still can go back to that moment with my girlfriend when I was really young, maybe 7, and feel that shame, you know?
Oh.
Yeah, I was really, really young.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so did it feel liberating? As a matter of fact, I want to know this because I have a few more strip club questions. Because to be honest, I have never felt comfortable in a strip club. I've always felt, I think I got this from my mom. I'm an empath. And I've always looked at it as somebody was being forced to do something that they didn't want to do, right? Like you talked about you needing money, and this was and then I look around and you're dealing with very unhygienic people. By the way, how do you deal with that when there's somebody who it's like, I don't know, but they have money, and so how does that work?
You mean like they're like dirty or sweaty or
whatever you consider, like
they smell bad?
Really bad looking, unhygienic? You define whatever that is that you've had to deal with.
I just operate differently when I'm with them. I don't get as close, and I'm, you know, sometimes they'll say something like, you know, I don't think you're taking care of yourself. Let's talk about your health and whatnot. You know, I go into that conversation a lot because I'm a huge health advocate, health coach. You know, how can we help you and like leave you better than you came in? And I can tell that you are not doing well. Your breath smells like you're rotting from the inside. I know it's like really rough and disgusting, but I've told somebody that. I've said that
all
to
kinds
somebody.
of people that you've had to deal with.
Yeah.
And you started in like a small club somewhere. I can't remember. Where was it at?
It was in Wisconsin. It was really gnarly. Yeah, in the middle of nowhere, like where a bunch of truckers came through.
Oh, I can imagine. Okay. You also talked about your first time on stage and how it was nerve-wracking. You had these big shoes on.
I did.
Let's talk about that rebuilding process. How, because being on stage is being on stage. People get butterflies and they're nervous, and it's like, am I doing this right? This is my first time. When was so tell me about that first time, and then tell me about the first time you felt comfortable and you felt like, man, I'm really in my power being here on stage.
Wow. Yeah. That first time on stage, I definitely felt the butterflies and I felt nervous. And that went away pretty fast because I've been on stages since I was really, really young. I think maybe 3 or 4. I had my first solo performance on stage. I was in dance, and not that it was a million people, but it was a good amount of people, you know, observing me, watching me. And I had to do it right. The choreography, I had to know it perfectly because I was doing a recital, you know? So I feel like I've always been somewhat comfortable on stage. But that first moment when I had the wrong shoes and, you know, I had never stripped before, I had no idea what to do with the pole. I basically didn't even touch it. I was just like, this is not going to go well, but I can like, you know, do some floor work. I've always been
I
able
was
to
just
do
laughing when you wrote, I was doing some ghetto booty shaking, something like that. What did you say? It was like twerk. I don't remember how you said it, but something along those lines.
I grew up in a neighborhood where I'll just say it this way, I was the only white girl for like a pretty, like a couple mile radius. It was like, you know, that's the neighborhood I grew up in. So the culture I grew up in and I really adopted and felt comfortable with was that I was listening to like hip hop and watching those kind of music videos, and my girlfriends would dance like that. And I was like, okay, I can go do the crybaby on the floor against the wall. And that was, what was I, like 9 years old? So I've always been like, that's always been my thing. Like, I feel comfortable in that place. Like, that felt culturally appropriate to me. Like, that feels normal to me. So getting on stage and getting into that vibe and listening to that kind of music just felt, you know, I was like, oh yeah, I know how to do this. Like, I know how to move like this.
Love it. Does being a sex worker have, by the way, what is the difference between being an exotic dancer and a sex worker?
I think it's just a different way of saying it. And I will loop around because I didn't answer the rest of that question.
Oh, okay.
I didn't go to when I felt comfortable on stage.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll just say that I felt comfortable on stage once I was on a bigger stage, because I was like,
wow.
Oh, I made it. Okay. Like, I know what I'm doing now because I'm at a big club and this is like, you know, a respected club, like more affluent people come here. So yeah, I'm on the right stage now. That's a quick answer for that.
People usually get more shy when it's more people, when it's a bigger stage.
Yeah, I felt like I had come up, I had leveled up, so it felt good. And I felt like, you know, there was tons of people that night. It was at Lollipops in Daytona, and it's when the song Lollipop was popular too, and they played that song for me, and I had like a sucker in my mouth while I was on stage, which was so like, no one would ever do that. It was just kind of, it was almost trashy, but I was like, just, you know, I felt like in my power walking around being like seductive and taking over the stage there.
The sex industry has a lot of stigmas. Many countries that have a far more open-minded approach to sex work than the US. How would you want people to view the sex industry?
It's not there yet, but I'd love it to be a place of healing. I think sexual energy is healing energy if it's used in the right way. And my call to action, actually, when I did the book campaign for Erotic Hustle back in 2019, the end of the video that I did was a call to action for sex workers to really claim their power in the sex industry, to like really shift the industry and really offer something beautiful to anybody who walks in the door, a man or a woman, and really be present with them and let them feel that energy from a shameless place, and let it be healing. And I think they're really, the sex industry and strip clubs, powerful, powerful places for healing.
I met a lady at the gym a few months ago, and I do the stories for Rebuilding the Beast on Instagram. It's like a blog space for the people I meet every day. And so I asked the lady, I said, what was my, like, what is your, I can't remember if I asked her for a quote, like your advice to your younger self or something along those lines. And she said that her goal was she wanted to make sex work legal. I was like, oh no, you meant like you want to make it illegal, because that's how my brain worked. I was like, oh, she was like, no, it's already illegal. Joker, pretty much. I'm trying to make it legal. So now I'm curious. What does that mean? Why? And she talked about the sexual liberation, how women are already doing it. What if they wanted to do it as a job? Why can't they do it for work? And especially for the people who are already working in the industry, they're working illegally and there is no protection for them. They don't get to call the cops. They don't get to have anybody be their advocate. They're at the mercy of these pimps and, you know, whoever is in charge of them or whoever can harm them. So when she got to talking about it, I was like, wow, I never thought about this before. And this is the point of this podcast. This is the point of me having conversation. Like, this is how you get to learn other people's perspectives. Another point that she made was that she has a friend who was in that industry, and she looks really young, and how she's older, she's in her 20s or 30s, but she looks really young. She looks like she's in her teens. And she gets a lot of clients who would otherwise be pedophiles because they would be, attracted to these young kids. And she felt like in some way that she was doing good in the world because she was taking that on, as opposed to them committing those crimes or, hurting kids. And so that made sense to me. That made it's legal in Germany and a few other countries I've heard of. What do you think about that? What do you think about legalizing sex work?
First off, I want to meet this woman.
I would love to introduce you.
Yeah, I'm right with her 100%. And I love that perspective too. That was a little shift for me because I look really young. So it's also a thing for me. I walk into a club and they're like, oh yeah, I think you're like 20 or something. I'm like, you're over a decade off. So yeah, that really resonates for me. And I think that we do need to legalize sex work as a whole. You see that this works a lot better in all the countries, and also places, there are little pockets in the US where it is. It's so strange to me to put a stamp on what brought us into the world that says this is bad. It makes no sense to me. Sex and sex work is evil and bad and it should be illegal. Like, how do you think you fucking got here?
I also want to know, so how we met. We met together with your partner, and currently in a relationship. Was it difficult for you to find a man that accepted your work?
I don't know if I was looking for a man that accepted my work, but fortunately, my partner used to manage a strip club. So he understands the industry and he has a perspective that most people that I would meet would not actually. How often am I going to meet a man who is managing a strip club? I feel like that's pretty rare. So I trust, it sounds very wooey, but I trust the universe and that whoever is supposed to be put in front of me will. So it wasn't looking for that partner. And when I met my ex-husband, I was already in the industry and he knew that, and he was also comfortable with it. So I don't think that I end up interfacing with people who are not. And if they're not, then we're not meant to be.
This is one of those, this is the last of those questions. I think it's the last. It is, the last of the question from my friends, because they had questions. Does being a sex worker have positive or negative effects on the sex you have with people you're in a relationship with?
Absolutely affects it 100%. And that's been part of the work I've had to do, like performing. And I think that happens with people who aren't in the sex industry and who aren't performers. But, I'm like, oh, I know how to do this. I know how to be really, really seductive and like overly sexual. And like, I know what you want and I know what guys want. And like, I know how to perform in this setting. So I've really had to work on being present and not performing and just being with my partner.
Is this still enjoyable for you when you're performing?
Yeah. I love performing. So it's like, no matter whether I'm doing it, in a sexual setting or on a stage, I get pleasure from, being that performative.
I guess my question to that is like, why would you then stop performing if it feels good for you while you're performing? Does it feel disconnected? Is that why?
That's a good question. It's my tantric practices and what I know to be the potential that I see in the connection with a partner. And while I'm performing, that's not there. I can't reach that highest potential because in Tantra, the the ultimate, I don't want to say goal, but where you can head to is fully merging with your partner and you are experiencing God or source or like the highest through union with your partner, through sexual union with your partner.
There is a known orgasm gap, meaning that women statistically have less orgasms than men. What would you tell male listeners to help bridge that gap? And on the flip side, what is your advice for women to experience more pleasure?
Such a good question. The study of Tantra is obviously my go-to. I'm going to say, educate yourself, read the books, Montauk Chia, Multi-Orgasmic Couple, great book. Both of you read that together, start doing the practices and realize, you can scratch the surface and feel it and realize that there's so much potential in lovemaking, like what you can experience, what you can feel, the pleasure you can feel. It's cosmic. I don't know what other word to use for it, but we're always just scratching the surface sexually. I feel like I can't say that I've reached the highest level a million times, but I've had a glimpse of it. And, just this surface level, fleshy, sport fucking thing, it's just like not that fulfilling. And you don't realize that it's not fulfilling until you start trying other things.
You talked about the sacredness and the sanctity of sex, and we've talked about bringing consciousness to a strip club. And so you had this idea of a conscious strip club. Tell me about this and how you can use that as a place to lead people to their higher selves. Is that what that was?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I was just touching upon, giving people the experience of, oh, my pleasure can take me here. Connecting with somebody, doing it consciously can take me here. It's like, infinite, like the sky's the limit kind of thing.
How would you do that in a strip club though? How would you do it when I see this girl, like it's kind of like she's a piece of meat. How do you go from that interaction to then a higher level, higher vibration of like connection and intimacy? Because it feels like that would be intimacy, right?
Being firmly rooted in my belief system that it's possible, approaching somebody with that, like it's unshakable. I believe that you can get to this higher level when you allow me to just guide you and truly like interface with you. And as soon as you're present with me and we can drop in and start to merge and like exchange energy in this very fluid way, and like we're consciously circulating our energy together, you will feel. I would always get guys to sit in the booth, close their eyes, and I would just do kind of a yab yum position with them. And that's when I'm sitting on their lap and my legs are over their legs, and like what's connected are the genital center is connected, but of course we're both clothed, like we're not connecting in that way, but that's how you're aligned. It's like a hug. And then I would have them close their eyes and just breathe with me. There was no focus on anything sexual. I just wanted them to simply breathe with me. And even from that, they would say, wow, I don't know what just happened, but I felt something. So if you get that core, that foundation to start moving, then you can build on it. You need to lay the foundation and then we can build.
Let's talk about what you're doing now. And this will be, as we're winding down, what you're working towards now. Because like I said, you are a beast. You have gone through the traumas of childhood and youth, and you continue to evolve. Right. And now you're telling the story. I'm sure it has not been easy to release a book where you're telling all these vulnerable details of your life. We even talked about this a little bit.
Yeah, we do have to mention this. Of course, we will again, like as we close. But part of doing this podcast was I really took to heart what you said about you wanting to write a book.
Oh, yes. yes. Okay, I will make my declaration after you tell us how it was writing this book and make me scared about writing a book.
That's an important part. We can't skip over that. That's like
I appreciate you remembering. That's actually amazing. I appreciate you.
Most important piece. There was a couple questions there. I mean, you just said how I feel about writing this book, and then you said what I'm working towards now. And then honestly, I want to offer everyone through this book and through just who I am in the world. I want my presence, my existence, to open people's minds to what's possible. And psychedelics is a huge part of that. And that's why I co-created Entheo Ventures with my partner. And that's why I wrote the book. Like, we don't have to believe everything that we think, or believe what's told to us. And we also don't need to live in this reality if we're not loving every moment of it. There are so many tools like psychedelics to utilize and open up to the possibility of a better world, a more conscious world, like more love, more connection. I sound like such a wooey hippie when I go on this rant, but it's like I want the world to be a better place.
It's so funny how when we say love and connection, people are like, oh man, that's you being really, it is a true thing. People do feel that way. And I catch myself now, because that is really what we want, right? At the end of everything, like, we are chasing success, and we just want that, which is the love and connection, but we turn into these other things, right? It's acceptance, it's love, it's connection to other humans. That's what we're chasing with all these other things, and we try to fill a void, which when you end up getting these things, you realize that there is a void. That's not the thing that fills it. It is the basic things that are hippie and wooey, right? Wow, I'm so grateful for this podcast and for this episode, because you taught me a lot today, things that I don't know, and like I said, things that make me feel uncomfortable, conversations about psychedelics and about sex. And you're definitely an inspiration. I think I've told you this already, but I'll tell you this on the podcast as well, because you've taken what is your pain and you've transformed it, and you've healed yourself, and now you're working to help heal other people. So you have inspired me, and I will say on this podcast, I will start working on my book. And that is what has happened here on this Rebuilding the Beast podcast. We're building Lana Shay. My final, and so I don't know how does the declaration work? Do I just say I'm working on a book?
No, you say I would like everyone to hold me accountable and ask if I'm writing it.
Please, guys. Hold me accountable, reach out to me, DM me about this book. And yes, give me ideas on how to even write a book, because I have no idea. You gave me the challenge of writing 15 minutes every day.
Yeah.
So I'm doing that now. But if you guys have any challenges for me as I'm going through this process as well, my goal would be to be vulnerable as well. That is my challenge for myself in telling my story, because a lot of times I think we gloss over some of the hard parts.
Yeah.
So in true Rebuilding Beast fashion, the final question is always the same, but it's my favorite question. It is, Lana Shay, you are a beast now, and you continue to evolve, but I don't want to forget the little girl. And so I have a best friend who says, when you talk to yourself, you're talking to an inner child. And she asked what child that was. And she had this question, and she was asking us that this weekend. I was like, wow, I never thought about that before. So my question to you is, if you could talk to your younger self, and you get to choose, it could be you in school, you when the first time you started working, you just get to decide. But if you could talk to your younger self, what would you say to her?
Wow. To just never give up. That's something I'm still learning. So I think that I really needed to hear that, because I still need to hear it now. So just keep going, never give up, and you will succeed.
What would that mean to her if she heard to never give up?
That there is a strength inside, no matter what's happening on the outside. And that we are rooted, and there is support beneath us. It's another wooey thing that I've really gotten into in these years of my life, but we are always supported. And maybe some people say it's a higher power, or it's God, or whatever it is, we are always supported, and that I am supported no matter what. And I have that strength inside of me.
You are supported no matter what. Just never give up. Lana Shay, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
That is the show. Hey, Festus here. I hope you liked that episode. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and here's some more episodes that you might like. On this end.